Today on Don't Talk TV, we're going to look at three possible crimes that Liberal MP Han Dong could be charged with for his involvement in trying to convince the Communist Party of China to not release Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig from their unlawful detention in China. Hello, my name's Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. So one of the biggest pieces of news in Canada lately, much to my surprise, has been this leaked information from CSIS that China has been interfering in Canadian elections. I'm not surprised that the Chinese Communist Party has been interfering in our elections. I'm surprised that mainstream media has taken this ball and run with it, apparently. And I'm surprised that someone from CSIS actually revealed this. I mean, CSIS, the people who think Diagolon is the most existential threat to Canadian society, and from outward appearances seem to think that the Chinese are just the best people ever, Chinese Communist Party, best party ever, the way the leader of our country does, which we'll get into a bit on this show. And in connection with that, there's been some revelations about Liberal MP Han Dong. Now, I know he's resigned from the Liberal caucus, but we all know that that's a empty, meaningless gesture. He's still going to vote 100% in keeping with the Liberal Party, just as if he was a Liberal caucus member. So I'm going to continue to refer to him as a Liberal MP. He was elected under that party's banner. He'll continue to do everything that party wants him to do as if he was still a member. So just because he doesn't have a color red when you look him up on the Parliament website doesn't mean he's not a Liberal Party member anymore. In looking at that, I want to look at what are some possible charges that could result if we assumed that we live in some dream world where our police forces aren't highly politicized and might actually investigate this and lay charges. What charges could they lay? And some of the answers may surprise you. So first, we'll look at a bit of the context, backdrop to this, and then we'll look at three charges that I've identified under the criminal code as possibilities for this situation. So the backdrop to this starts with this global news story titled "Two High-Level Memos Allege Beijing Covertly Funded Canadian Election Candidates." And they say here, at the beginning of the article, Justin Trudeau said that he was never briefed on the issue, and his security advisor has dismissed it out of hand. But two high-level national security reports before and after the 2019 election suggest they were warned that Chinese government officials were funneling money to Canadian political candidates. And these documents reviewed by Global News assert that Chinese officials in Toronto had dispersed money into a covert network tasked to interfere in Canada's 2019 election. So it indicates here that after the nomination process, foreign states clandestinely direct contributions to and support for the campaigns and political parties of preferred candidates. Now, I have the link to this article in the show description. You can look it up. You may well have heard of this or seen other news stories, and we know that the Liberal Party, specifically under Justin Trudeau, is the one the Communist Party of China wanted to make sure was re-elected in 2019. Now, why would that be, you ask? Well, viewers probably already know, but we know from before Mr. Trudeau was Prime Minister of Canada that he's always had a long-held admiration of China and its, quote, basic dictatorship, unquote, as he calls it. And here's the infamous clip where he says that.
There's a level of admiration I actually have for China because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime and say we need to go green as fast as we need to start investing in solar. I mean, there is a flexibility.
So following on that, the Communist Party of Canada helped to get the Liberals re-elected yet again in 2019, and I'm sure they were involved in earlier elections since Mr. Trudeau first became leader of the party, because the Chinese know how to watch YouTube and listen to interviews just as well as we do, probably better. So then we have this article, again from Global News. Liberal MP Han Dong secretly advised Chinese diplomat in 2021 to delay freeing two Michaels, according to sources. So it says here, Liberal MP Han Dong, who is at the center of Chinese influence allegations, privately advised a senior Chinese diplomat in February 2021 that Beijing should hold off freeing Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, according to two separate national security sources. Both sources said Dong allegedly has suggested to Han Tao, China's consul general in Toronto, that if Beijing released the two Michaels, whom China accused of espionage, the opposition conservatives would benefit. That's the context, and I'm going to proceed as if this is 100% true, and I think we have every reason to believe it's true, because mainstream media is reporting it. Not because mainstream media is trustworthy at all, but because you don't bite the hand that feeds you, and we know the Liberal Party of Canada feeds mainstream media to the tune of $660 million a year. So if they're going against the Liberal Party of Canada, it must be true, because it's against their interest to go against the parties. They would never lie against the Liberal Party of Canada. They would only report something like this if it's 100% true. And in law, this is a principle of evidence that admissions against interest are generally deemed to be the truth, because people generally don't admit to things that are against their own interest unless it's true. Now, there are some nuances if it's coerced in some way or if they're tricked into saying it, but that clearly can't possibly be the case here. The Liberal Party of Canada is putting zero pressure on the media to be reporting this. To the contrary, as we saw from the first article, they're dismissing this as lies and nonsense and fantasy. So, given that they're going against who are essentially their masters, I think we can say with a high degree of probability that these stories, at least these particular stories, are 100% true. So, assuming this is true, and I think that's a fair assumption, as I've said, what crimes might Han Dong have committed, or what could he be prosecuted for? So we'll take a look at the criminal code. Now, I think the first one that comes to mind, and this is one that most people have mentioned to me, is treason. So let's look at section 46. What is the definition of treason in law? So there's high treason under section 46, which is killing or attempting to kill Her Majesty or His Majesty, the monarch of Canada, starting a war against Canada, or taking part in an act preparatory to a war, or assisting an enemy at war with Canada. So China is definitely not at war with Canada. I mean, not in the sense of bombs falling. There could be an argument that there's somewhat of a Cold War going on. I think they are waging a form of warfare against us, but it's not the type of war that would meet any test under the criminal code. We're talking about war here where tanks are driving, like what's going on in Ukraine. So that's high treason. Now, treason, everyone commits treason who uses force or violence for the purpose of overthrowing the government of Canada, who communicates or makes available to an agent of the state other than Canada military or scientific information, conspires with any person to commit high treason, forms an intent to do anything that is high treason, or conspires with a person to do anything mentioned in paragraph B. Now, I don't see how any of these fit with what Han Dong has done. We're not at war with China. He hasn't tried overthrowing the government. What he's done is he's really hurt and kept a couple of Canadian citizens in prison, but this doesn't amount to treason as defined in the criminal code. Now, you might argue that the definition of treason in the criminal code is insufficient. That may well be the case, but we're not talking about whether the definition is good or not. We're just discussing what is the definition under the current iteration of the Criminal Code of Canada. So, having concluded that treason is not a charge that could stick, what are some other options? So if we look at section 22 of the Criminal Code, we see that it's a crime to counsel someone to commit an offense. So section 22(1) says where a person counsels another person to be a party to an offense, and that other person is afterwards a party to that offense, the person who counseled is party to that offense, notwithstanding that the offense was committed in a way different from that which was counseled. And every person who counsels another person to be a party to an offense is a party to every offense that the other person commits in consequence of the counseling. So I think that clearly fits here, that Han Dong was clearly counseling the continuation of an offense. So what offense is he counseling? In my view, it's unlawful confinement or hostage taking under section 279 sub 2 of the Criminal Code. That says everyone takes a hostage who, with intent to induce any person other than the hostage or any group of persons or any state or international intergovernmental organization to commit or cause to be committed any act or omission as a condition. whether they confine someone under sub A or in any manner utters, conveys, or causes any person to receive a threat that the death or bodily harm to a hostage will be caused. In my view, this clearly applies. The Chinese Communist Party, they clearly imprisoned the two Michaels, as they're often referred to, as retaliation or to put pressure on the Canadian government to release Meng Wanzhou, who is a Chinese national. We won't get into her whole background, but the bottom line is she was arrested trying to leave Canada on a warrant from the United States. The Chinese government then arrested and wrongfully imprisoned, unlawfully confined Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor in order to exert pressure on Canada to release Meng Wanzhou. Clearly, that meets the test of the criminal code here. So, Han Dong, in my respectful view, is clearly ought to be arrested on a charge of counseling the continued unlawful confinement of the two Michaels. I think there's then another option when we look under the terrorism provisions of the criminal code, starting at section 83. If we go down to the definition of terrorist activity, it's under sub A, an act or omission that is committed in or outside Canada that, if committed in Canada, is one of the following offenses. And I think sub 4 is the one that matches here. The offenses referred to in section 7, sub 3.1, that implement the International Convention Against the Taking of Hostages, adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations on December 17th, 1979. So we already spoke about how the two Michaels were hostages, so this is terrorism that was going on by the state of China, in my view. And if we look at section 83.19, everyone who knowingly facilitates a terrorist activity is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 14 years. So under that section as well, I would suggest Han Dong ought to be arrested for facilitating and counseling this terrorist activity of a state holding on to Canadian citizens for the purpose of getting one of their own citizens released in a completely unlawful manner. I'd be interested in what viewers think. Are there other charges that you think would be appropriate? Please post those comments in the comment section. I'd be interested to see them. All that said, I've outlined two charges that I think are appropriate, one that I don't think is appropriate. But this video is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, call a lawyer. You can call another lawyer or myself. My phone number and website are listed below. If there's topics you'd like to see me cover, please leave a comment in the comment section or send an email to the email address listed below. And if you found this video at all interesting, helpful, or informative, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and following us on social media.